Hi, this is Mark Richards, creator of CandidatesChair.com. Thanks for visiting the site and welcome to the free seminar on the hiring process, What's Taking So Long? What I hope to share in this seminar are the steps to reach a hiring decision, what takes time in that process, and what can cause delays. For many candidates, the hiring process is such a mystery it gets to be known as, "Can you just tell me what's taking so long?" Now notice this picture has strategic value, and look at who you're asking, because you may not get an answer. So to help set your expectations around how long it's going to take to make a hiring decision, this is where you can use your network to understand the company's process and the current status. The hiring process consists of a company asking itself questions. The first part relates to what they want in the role. The second part relates to who they want in the role. Now answering these questions will take time, and every company has its own approach. While the questions I present here are in sequential order, that doesn't mean that's how a company is going to approach it. When a company skips over a question, that's generally what stalls the process because they'll have to circle back and answer those questions. Now the wild card in hiring is the number of people involved. Rarely does one person get to make the hiring decision. My rule is the more people the role touches, the more people want to have a say. Therefore, the more people involved, the longer it takes. Now I'm going to focus on an example when someone leaves a company, but it's very similar to making a decision for a new role as well. A colleague of yours calls you and says their marketing director is going to leave the company. Before that company will move into the hiring process, though, this is the first question they're going to ask because they're going to want to transfer everything they can out of that person before they leave. Because chances are the role is going to go unfilled for a period of time, and they want to make sure nothing drops. So to start the process, you have to understand who needs to be involved and what role everyone will play. And these are important questions to ask. I have a personal experience of having been offered a position and then being retracted simply because additional people wanted to be involved in the decision and I had to go do some additional interviews. I got the job, which is a good thing. Hopefully these are decided up front. Now once you come to meet the discussion, these are some of the questions that are typically asked because each time a position goes open, it's a chance to rethink how the department's put together. And what I would say is that the further you go up in the organization, the more likely you're going to take time talking about these. And it's good to take the time to answer these questions up front because that'll help avoid delays later. Once you decide to proceed with the replacement, you need to make sure you have an accurate job description. If you don't have an accurate job description, the risk and the delay is not the time to put it together, but everyone begins to get focused on other things, so getting them back focused on the hiring can take time. The other thing that can add time in this process is if you want to add additional skills into the position. When you look back at the person that held the role before, you may think to yourself, okay, the company's changing, so perhaps we need to add some additional skills to match where the company's going. Now we come to financial considerations, and what you're really looking for here from your network is how tightly does the company control its hiring decisions based on their current financial performance, and whether that is based on their budget or how their quarterly results are. I've had a number of colleagues tell me that they've delayed a hiring decision simply because they didn't have enough money left in the budget for the year, or the quarterly results were just poor, so they had to wait to the next quarter to see how they did. Again, the real key thing that you're trying to find out from your network is how tightly does the company manage its financial position. So now we move on to finding someone. Most companies begin to look internally. Even if a colleague tells you there does not seem to be an internal candidate, many companies will still go through the process of a formal posting just to make sure they can fairly offer the role to everyone. The other thing that can add time here is what I call the ripple effect, and if they can afford to have one person leave their position to take the open role. If there's no internal candidates, the next usual step is a company will use its network to try and find someone. And what really adds time here is simply the informality of the process. First, the people in the company will try to determine if they have anyone they can think of, and then you go ahead and try and find someone. Most of us have gotten calls from colleagues where you go back and forth about a potential position, and as you go through this process, they reach out to you, you try and schedule time, you go back and forth, and again, the process just tends to be a little looser. And remember, they're not just talking to you, but also trying to find several other candidates so they have a pool of people they talk to. Now, this is an optional step where a company can go to a job board to find someone. If they do move out to a job board, the two things that'll take time is deciding where to post the position and making sure they have the appropriate write-up. It's the second step here that takes some time, and especially prioritizing and reviewing resumes. I once applied for a job online on February 1st, and on March 15th I got a call to interview. I had actually forgotten that I had applied for the job, quite frankly, but because the company got over 100 resumes for the position, it took them that long to sort through them and prioritize them and determine who they wanted to call in for interviews. If a company decides to go to a recruiter, you can usually add about 3 to 6 weeks. First, they'll need to find a recruiter and get them approved. When a company moves to take a recruiter, they're going to pay somewhere between the 25% to 33% of the base salary. So what happens is companies tend to get their money's worth. The set of requirements becomes very detailed. And that's where the challenge is for the recruiter, is to find enough candidates that fit those specific requirements that the company is seeking. To the last question, how long it'll take to find those candidates, it's really based on how specific the company makes its requirements. If you see a job description that's very detailed and very specific, you can assume it's going to take the recruiter several weeks to find enough candidates that fit those requirements. So now you go to meet the candidates. The timing on this is driven by how many people are involved and how their process works. I can share another personal experience. I once met with a CEO who told me right up front that the hiring process was going to take at least 3 months, and he was right, simply because they had multiple people involved in the process, and each person was going to take multiple interviews with me. While I was wishing it would go faster, I never was frustrated simply because they kept me up to date as to where it was, and it was right along what they said it was going to happen. So we move to the final step in deciding who to hire, and this gets down to who has the final decision, whether it's a panel or one person. It's a second question that I think can take some extra time. I really believe that people tend to hire the people they like versus the people that just have the best technical fit. And so because that's more subjective, it can add more time to the process. So I know what you're thinking. My head hurts. Well, just take 2 networking meetings and call me in the morning. To help avoid the potential frustration or concern, this is when you use your network to find out how the company goes about hiring, where they currently stand, what's delaying the process if it is being stalled, and what's the expected timing. One last final tip. Long delays can happen, but don't assume anything. So just keep at it. Check in once in a while to find out what the status is, but don't assume it's dead until they tell you. Once again, this has been Mark Richards, creator of CandidatesChair.com. Thanks for visiting the site, and good luck today.